Do you know your enemies? Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. May the peace and blessings of Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be upon each and every one of you. My name is Salahudeen, and today we are speaking about the enemies of man. Do you know your enemies? Who are your enemies? No, it is not your neighbor who may harass you or throw his garbage in your area, or whose dog may come and defile your property or make a mess in your area. It is not some old friends who may have spoken ill about you. It is not someone who would have harassed you or cheated on you. It is not someone from a past relationship, an ex-spouse, or your in-laws. These are not your enemies. Our enemies in this world are from 4 places. Our enemies are the dunya, our nafs, our hawa, and the shaitan. The dunya, the Prophet ﷺ, is the fading nature of this world. The more we run to it, the more it runs away from us. This is one of the enemies of man, of the human being in general. This is one of our enemies. The Prophet ﷺ has said about the dunya, it is a cage for the believers, wa jannatul kafir, and a paradise for the disbelievers. Because we often feel encaged by this world, or we are restricted, we can't do this, we cannot do that. But this is the nature of this world. Because the more we run to it, the more it runs away from us. And we will keep running after this world, running after money, running after position, running after wealth, running after power, running after prestige. And the more we run after it, the more it runs away from us. And that's why Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, informs us that the dunya, the nature of this world, it is one of our enemies. So don't run after it. Don't run after it, and remember, ad-dunya sijnul mu'min. It is a cage for the believers, wa jannatul kafir. It is a paradise for those who do not believe. The second enemy is our nafs, our ego. Our ego, meaning everything that deals with I. This is an enemy. I am, I want, I need, I deserve. This childish mentality of I, me, myself, and I, this is our ego. This is one of our enemies. And we have to raise that ego in us from being an ego that is inclined to evil, nafsul ammara bisu, an ego that is inclined to evil, selfish ego that is focused on fulfilling its own selfish desires, its own selfish wants and needs, to being an ego, nafsul mutma'inna, an ego in line with wanting and doing what Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants. This is the purpose of Ramadan, my dear respected viewer. This is the purpose of Ramadan, for you to raise your ego from nafsul ammara bisu, that soul, that ego that is inclined to evil, to the ego that inclines to what Allah wants, to run away and to not be running after the dunya, but to realize its restrictions. The third enemy of man is the hawa, the desire, our physical pleasures. And Ramadan came to restrict this physical pleasure, because most of our physical pleasures are strengthened by food and by sexual desire. And Ramadan came to constrict this, that we abstain from food and from intimacy, restricting this hawa, that we can focus better on ourselves, to raise our egos to be an ego in line with what Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants. And the last of the enemies of man is the shaitan. And Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says through the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that in the month of Ramadan the gates of heaven are open and the doors of hell are shut, and the shayateen are enchained. The devils are chained. So Allah restricts the devils. He restricts the hawa. He warns us of the dunya, and He warns us of our egos. In this month of Ramadan, we need to identify these enemies that we have, treat them as enemies, and we need to use this month of Ramadan to benefit from this special time that Allah has restrained these enemies, that we may become the best version of ourselves. So my dear respected brother and my dear respected sister, do you know your enemies? Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.